It's 11:30 p.m. The lights are off, you're in bed, under the covers, and your phone is 6 inches from your face. You tell yourself you're just checking one last email, or maybe doom scrolling through a feed for 5 minutes. But then 30 minutes pass, then an hour. Your eyes feel gritty, maybe a little dry, but you figure, I'll just sleep it off. We've all been told that this is bad for our sleep hygiene, that the blue light messes with our melatonin. But what if the problem isn't just about whether you fall asleep? What if that light is physically altering the hardware inside your eye?
That is the terrifying distinction. We usually talk about blue light as a software problem. It hacks your brain's clock. But the research we are looking at today suggests it's also a hardware problem. It's not just tricking the eye. In some cases, it might be cooking it.
And that is exactly why I wanted to pull this specific paper. It's titled Exposure to Blue Light Reduces Melanopsin Expression in Intrinsically Photoreceptive Retinal Ganglion Cells and Damages the Inner Retina in Rats. It was published in Investigative Ophthalmology and Visual Science in 2022 by Natalia Ziolkowska and her colleagues. Now, that title is a mouthful, but the implications are incredibly heavy.
It is a heavy title for a heavy subject. What Ziolkowska and her team did was look past the rods and cones, the parts of the eye we usually worry about, and focus on a completely different set of cells that act as the conductors of our biological orchestra. And what they found happens to these cells under blue light exposure is, frankly, alarming.
Before we get into the damage, we have to understand the victim here. The paper focuses on these things called intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, or iPRGCs. I feel like most people know what rods and cones are. Rods are for low light, cones are for color. What on earth is an iPRGC?
Think of them as the eye's light meter. Rods and cones are like the camera lens. They capture the image, the details, the movement, the faces. They send that visual data to the brain so you can see. But for decades, scientists were puzzled because they found that even blind mice with 0 rods and 0 cones, could still tell if it was day or night. Their pupils would still shrink when you shined a light on them.
So they were blind to images, but not blind to brightness.
Precisely. And that led to the discovery of these iPRGCs in the early 2000s. They make up a tiny fraction, maybe 1 to 3% of the ganglion cells in a rat's retina. They don't help you read a book or recognize a face. Their only job is to measure the ambient light intensity, specifically blue light, and tell the brain what time it is. They contain a specific photopigment called melanopsin to do this.
Melanopsin. Okay, so if the rods and cones are the camera, the iPRGCs are the exposure sensor, ensuring the camera settings match the time of day. And this paper is investigating what happens when you point a high-intensity blue flashlight directly at that sensor for too long.
And not just any rat. This is a crucial point in Ziolkowska's methodology. A lot of historical vision research uses albino rats.
Which makes sense, right? Laboratory rats are usually white.
It makes sense for availability, but not for accuracy when studying light damage. Albino rats have no melanin pigment in their eyes. Melanin is like a built-in pair of sunglasses. It absorbs scattered light and protects the tissue. Using an albino rat to study light toxicity is like studying sunburns on someone with the palest skin imaginable who is standing on the equator. They burn almost instantly.
So the results end up being exaggerated.
Exactly. But Ziolkowska's team used brown Norway rats. These are pigmented rats. Their eyes are much more similar to human eyes in terms of light protection. So, if we see damage in these rats, we can't just dismiss it as, oh, well, they were sensitive albinos. If these rats are getting hurt, we need to pay attention.
Okay, let's look at how they hurt them. They set up 3 groups. They had a control group living a normal life, then they had an acute exposure group and a long-term exposure group. Break down the torture chamber here.
The acute exposure, or AE group, was intense. They put these rats in a cage with blue LEDs, specifically at 463 nanometers, which is right in the danger zone for blue light, blasting at 1,000 lux. And they left the lights on continuously for 2 days. 48 hours of non-stop, high-intensity blue light.
1,000 lux. Give me a real-world comparison. Is that like staring into the sun?
Not the sun, no. Sunlight is way brighter, up to 100,000 lux. 1,000 lux is more like the lighting in a TV studio or a very brightly lit supermarket operating theater. But imagine being in that supermarket lighting, but it's pure blue, and you cannot escape it for 2 days straight. No blinking, no darkness.
Got it. So that's the crash test dummy scenario. What about the long-term group?
The long-term exposure, or LTE, was more like a harsh work week. They did 10 days of a cycle, 12 hours of that intense blue light, followed by 12 hours of darkness. This mimics a more natural cycle, but with an unnatural light source.
So what happened to the light meters? Did the IPRGCs survive?
This is where it gets nuanced. In both the acute and the long-term groups, the researchers saw a significant drop in the number of IPRGCs that they could detect. In the control group, the retina is full of these melanopsin-positive cells. In the exposed groups, the numbers plummeted.
Plummeted as in died? Did the cells just explode?
The paper suggests it's actually more complicated than simple cell death, at least initially. They think it's largely down-regulation. The cells are still there, but they've stopped producing melanopsin, or they've drastically reduced it.
It's like they're going into hiding. They're overwhelmed by this signal, so they just shut down the receiver.
That's a great way to put it. It's a protective mechanism. If you walk into a deafeningly loud concert, you put in earplugs. These cells are essentially putting in earplugs to stop the screaming of the blue light. But here is the catch. Even if the cell body is still alive, the study found that in the acute group, the dendrites, the long branching arms that the cell uses to reach out and sense light, were significantly shorter.
So they aren't just putting in the earplugs, they are physically retracting. They're pulling their arms back.
Yes, and that is structural damage. When a neuron loses its dendrites or its axon integrity, it loses its ability to communicate. A light meter that can't send the signal to the CPU is just a useless lump of biology. And Ziolkowska's team didn't just look at the cell counts. They used electron microscopy to look inside the cells. That's where they found the smoking gun.
I remember reading this part, the mitochondria.
The mitochondria. In the acute exposure group, the mitochondria in the axons and dendrites were swollen. Their cristae, the internal folds where energy production happens, were disrupted.
Okay, for the non-biologist, why is a swollen mitochondrion bad news? I usually think of swelling as a bruise healing.
In a cell, a swollen mitochondrion is a disaster. It's like a lithium-ion battery that is puffed up in your laptop case. It means the energy regulation has failed. It usually precedes the release of toxic signals that tell the cell to commit suicide, apoptosis. The study explicitly mentions that blue light causes oxidative stress. It generates reactive oxygen species that attack the cell from the inside. The swollen mitochondria are basically the wreckage of that chemical warfare.
So we have the light meter cells pulling back their arms, turning off their sensors, and their internal batteries are blowing up. But did this damage spread, or was it contained just to these specific timekeeping cells?
It definitely spread. And this is vital because IPRGCs are tough. They are known to be more resilient than the rods and cones. But in the acute group, the researchers saw massive apoptosis, cell death, in the outer nuclear layer, which is where the rods and cones live. The retina looked like a war zone. They described vacuolization in the inner plexiform layer.
Vacuolization just sounds bad. It sounds like holes.
It is holes. It means the tissue is becoming spongy and filled with fluid where there should be dense neural connections. The study noted that the nerve fiber layer was thick and vacuolized, so you have the wiring of the eye literally disintegrating under the stress of this continuous blue light.
But wait, we have to be fair here. That was the acute group. 2 days of nonstop, unblinking torture. Most of us, even the worst phone addicts, sleep eventually. What about the long-term group? They had the 12 hours of darkness to recover. Did they see the same holes in the brain?
That is the silver lining, but it's a faint one. The long-term group did not show that massive retinal degeneration. The rods and cones mostly survived, the tissue didn't turn into a sponge.
However, and this is a big however, the IPRGCs still downregulated their melanopsin significantly.
So the camera survived, but the light meter still got confused.
Exactly. The structural integrity held up better, but the functional capacity of those circadian regulators was compromised. This suggests that even if you aren't permanently blinding yourself structurally, you're functionally dampening your body's ability to synchronize with the world. You're muting the signal that tells your body to be awake or asleep.
And the paper mentions that this downregulation happens pretty fast. It's not something that takes years.
Right. And this brings up a really interesting point about adaptation. The study references other research showing that sometimes, after the light stress stops, the melanopsin can come back. The system can reboot. But we don't know the tipping point. At what point does downregulation become permanent dysfunction? If you have swollen mitochondria, like the acute rats did, that's not just a software reboot. That's hardware damage.
There's a phrase the authors used in the introduction that caught my eye: transient smartphone blindness. It sounds like something made up by a worried parent, but they cited it as a real medical phenomenon.
It is real. It's rare, but documented. It usually happens when people lie in bed on one side, with one eye buried in the pillow and the other eye staring at a bright screen in a dark room. The open eye adapts to the light, bleaching its photopigments. When they turn the phone off, that eye is effectively blind for a few minutes while it readapts to the dark, causing a terrifying temporary vision loss. Ziolkowska mentions it to illustrate that our devices are powerful enough to physically alter photoreceptor chemistry in real time.
I want to circle back to the pigmented rat thing. You mentioned earlier that pigmented rats are tougher. If this study had been done on albino rats, would we have seen even worse results?
Almost certainly. In albino rats, light enters the eye and bounces around wildly because there is no dark pigment to absorb it. It's like being in a hall of mirrors. In pigmented rats and humans, the pigment epithelium absorbs that excess scatter. The fact that Ziolkowska saw significant mitochondrial damage and melanopsin loss in pigmented animals is what makes this paper so sobering. It means the pigment isn't a magic shield. High-energy blue light, given enough intensity and duration, punches right through that defense.
So let's apply this to us. We aren't rats living in a cage with LED strips taped to the walls. We have pupils that constrict. We blink. We look away. How worried should the average person be about their mitochondria swelling up?
We shouldn't panic, but we should be aware of the mechanism. The intensity in this study, 1,000 lux, is high, but not impossible to encounter. If you have a high-end tablet on max brightness right next to your cornea, you're getting a significant dose. But the real issue for humans is the chronic nature of it. We don't do 48 hours continuous, but we do 40 years of 10 hours a day.
It's the cumulative oxidative stress.
Precisely. The paper talks about oxidative stress as the driver. Your cells have antioxidants to clean up the mess, but if the blue light exposure is constant, you deplete those janitors. The garbage, the reactive oxygen species, piles up, and eventually the mitochondria fail. That's the pathway.
And it's interesting that the damage in the acute group wasn't just in the IPRGCs. It was the photoreceptors too. The study noted that rod outer segments had disarranged discs. That's the actual light-catching machinery getting scrambled.
Yes, and vacuoles at the transition zone between the inner and outer segments. Imagine the neck of the photoreceptor getting choked off. It shows that blue light toxicity is broad spectrum. It hits the circadian setters, the image formers, and the support wiring.
Did the paper offer any hope or just a warning?
The hope lies in the resilience of the LTE group. The fact that the retina didn't disintegrate under the 12-hour cycle suggests our eyes have robust repair mechanisms during the dark phase. The dark is not just an absence of light, it's a period of active cellular maintenance. The problem is we're shortening that maintenance window. We are encroaching on the dark.
Or skipping the maintenance shift.
And when you skip maintenance for too long, the machinery breaks. Ziolkowska's work is a stark reminder that light is energy. It is radiation. We treat it like it's just information, pixels on a screen, but biologically, it is a physical force interacting with delicate proteins and membranes.
It changes the way I look at night mode on my phone.
I used to think it was just a gimmick to make the screen look amber. But if it reduces the peak energy hitting that 463 nanometer danger zone, it might actually be saving my mitochondria.
It helps, but distance helps more. Intensity drops off squarely with distance. Holding the phone 12 inches away instead of 6 inches away drastically reduces the lux hitting your retina. And of course, darkness. Real darkness.
So the takeaway from Ziolkowska et al. Is that our eyes are incredibly complex instruments with specific sensors for time that are distinct from our sensors for vision, and blue light has a unique ability to possibly degrade those sensors over time.
That is the bottom line. The IPRGCs are the unsung heroes of our health, regulating everything from sleep to mood, and we are stress testing them in ways evolution never anticipated.
There's a sensor in your body right now that you don't know about. It's sitting there, wide awake, even if you think you're asleep. It's not your eyes, or at least not the part of your eyes you use to read a book or recognize a face. It's a secret, third system of vision that has absolutely nothing to do with seeing the world and everything to do with timing it. Think about that for a second. You have eyes that are built to see, but hidden inside them are eyes that are built to feel time. And for 300,000 years, those sensors had a very specific job description. They waited for the blue dome of the sky to fade into the orange of a fire and then into the absolute crushing black of the night. That was the contract. Light breaks things down, darkness builds them back up. But in the last 150 years, a blink of an eye, genetically speaking, we tore up that contract. We built a world of perpetual noon. And the scary part isn't just that we're tired. It's that this hidden system, this ancient light meter in your skull, is currently screaming at your brain that the sun never sets. Today we're going to talk about why your eyes were optimized for a world that no longer exists, how artificial light is essentially a Trojan horse bypassing your biological firewalls, and the physiological bill we're racking up by forcing our retinas to live in a 24/7 state of emergency. Part 1. The Blue Sky Detector. So, to understand why your phone screen at 11 p.m. is a biological weapon, we have to look at the hardware. For a long time, science told us a pretty simple story about vision. We had rods and we had cones. Rods were the night shift, sensitive, grayscale, good for spotting a predator in the moonlight. Cones were the day shift, color, detail, high resolution. And we thought that was it. We thought the eye was just a camera. But there was always a weird hole in that theory. You could take a mouse that was completely blind, no rods, no cones, literally incapable of seeing an image, and if you shone a bright light on it, its pupils would still constrict. It still knew that it was daytime. Its body would still shift its sleep cycle. How? If the camera is broken, how does the brain know the lights are on? It wasn't until the early 2000s that we found the answer, and it's honestly one of the coolest discoveries in modern neuroscience. It turns out, scattered across your retina like a handful of dust is a third type of cell. They're called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or IPRCGs. I know, catchy name. Let's just call them the timekeepers. These cells don't help you see. They don't send images to the visual cortex. Instead, they're hardwired directly into the hypothalamus, specifically a tiny cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock. And here's the kicker. These timekeepers are terrible at seeing light in general. They don't care about a candle. They don't care about the moon. They are specifically chemically tuned to detect the exact wavelength of a blue sky. They are looking for the sun. This is evolutionary genius. If you're a hunter-gatherer, you don't want your biological clock resetting every time you look at a campfire or a torch. Fire is orange. It's long wavelength light. The timekeeper cells are almost blind to it. So for millennia, a human could sit around a fire all night, and as far as their circadian rhythm was concerned, they were in total darkness. The biological night began the moment the blue sky vanished. Part 2. The Great Override. So, we have this elegant system, a high-pass filter that ignores firelight and waits for the dawn. And then we invented the light bulb. But it's not just the light bulb, it's the kind of light bulb. See, the old incandescent bulbs, the hot, inefficient ones Edison gave us, they were actually not that bad. They put out a lot of heat, a lot of red and orange light. They were essentially electrified campfires. The problem started when we decided to get efficient. We moved to fluorescent and then to LED. And the way you make a white LED is interesting. You usually take a blue LED, a very bright, very powerful blue spike of energy, and you coat it with phosphors to make it look white to the naked eye. But your conscious vision is easily fooled. The timekeeper cells, they are not fooled. When you look at a modern screen or stand under a cool white street lamp, your conscious eyes see white light. But those IPRGCs, those ancient blue sky detectors, they see a supernova of pure azure. They see the noonday sun directly in front of your face. It doesn't matter if it's midnight. It doesn't matter if you're lying in bed. The signal hitting the master clock is clear. Wake up, it is noon. Hunt, gather, be alert. It bypasses your defenses because your biology assumes that kind of blue light cannot exist at night. In nature, the only source of light that intense and that blue is the sun. We essentially hacked the administrative password to our own central nervous system. We created a signal that suppresses melatonin, the hormone that doesn't just make you sleepy, but signals every cell in your body to switch into repair mode. And we suppressed it with a device we hold 6 inches from our face. Part 3. The metabolic cost. Now, you might think, okay, so I stay up a little late. I'm tired. Big deal. But the cost isn't just fatigue. It's cellular damage. And this is where the research gets really sobering. Retinal cells are some of the most energy-hungry cells in the entire body. They burn fuel at a rate that would make a marathon runner jealous. And because they work so hard, they produce a lot of waste, metabolic trash, oxidative stress. In a natural cycle, darkness is the cleaning crew. When the lights go out, the retina shifts gears. The machinery that catches photons powers down, and the machinery that repairs cell membranes and clears out toxins ramps up. It's a literal physical regeneration. Recent studies on fruit flies, whose eyes are surprisingly similar to ours genetically, show that if you disrupt this clock, if you deny the eye that period of darkness, the repair proteins don't get made, the trash doesn't get taken out. We're seeing evidence that 24/7 retinal stimulation creates a state of chronic oxidative stress. We are forcing the eye to run a marathon without ever letting it stop to drink water. And it's not just the eyes. Because those timekeeper cells control the master clock, when they scream daytime at 2 a.m., your pancreas thinks it's lunchtime and changes how it processes insulin. Your kidneys change how they filter filtration. Your blood pressure stays elevated when it should be dipping. We call it light pollution, but that sounds too external. It's really light toxicity. It's a pollutant that enters through your eyes and disrupts the timing of every organ in your body. We are living in a state of permanent jet lag, not because we're traveling, but because we've decoupled the sun from the sky. Part 4. The lost sleep. The tragedy here isn't just biological, it's cultural. We've forgotten how humans used to sleep. If you go back to records from the 1700s or medieval Europe, you find something fascinating. People didn't sleep in one big 8-hour block. That's a modern invention. Back then, before the street lamp and the iPhone, the sun would go down and people would go to bed early, maybe 8 or 9 p.m. They would sleep for about 4 hours. This was called first sleep. Then, around midnight, they would wake up, naturally. The brain would surface, and for an hour or two, they would be awake in the dark. They'd talk to their bed partners, they'd pray, they'd reflect on their dreams. It was a time of quiet, liminal consciousness. Then they'd fall back asleep for second sleep until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. It was the natural rhythm of the human animal in the absence of artificial light. That midnight waking period was chemically different from daytime wakefulness. Prolactin levels, a hormone associated with relaxation and peace, were sky high. It was a meditative state that we have completely eradicated. When we blasted away the night with artificial light, we compressed our sleep. We forced it into this anxious singular block. We lost that moment of midnight reflection. We lost the connection to the night sky. And physically, we lost the downtime our eyes and brains need to wash away the day's damage. So, what's the takeaway? I'm not saying you need to smash your smartphone and live in a cave, but we have to respect the hardware. We have to respect the timekeepers. They are ancient, they are stubborn, and they are easily confused. Dim the lights at night. Use red or orange hues that mimic the campfire, not the sun. Give your eyes the darkness they were designed to crave.
If you leave a bicycle out in the rain for a month, you know exactly what happens. It rusts. The metal reacts with oxygen and water. It corrodes, and eventually the chain snaps. It's a slow, visible degradation. Now, I want you to picture that same process, that same corrosive chemical breakdown happening inside the most sensitive, energy-hungry cells in your body. But instead of rain causing the rust, it's light. Specifically, the high-energy, short-wave light that is currently blasting out of the device you are using to listen to this. We usually think of light as information. It's how we read, how we navigate, how we see faces. But biologically, light isn't just data. It's energy. And when you bombard your retina with a specific frequency of that energy, constant blue light, you aren't just seeing a color. You are stressing the cellular machinery to its breaking point. Today, we aren't just talking about tired eyes or digital strain. We're going to look at the molecular crime scene. We're going to break down how constant blue light forces retinal cells into a state of chronic oxidative stress and, this is the scary part, how it simultaneously dismantles the repair crew that's supposed to fix the damage. To understand why blue light is different, we have to talk about physics for just a second. I promise. No equations, just the spectrum. Visible light travels in waves. On the red end, the waves are long and lazy, carrying less energy. On the blue and violet end, the wavelengths are short, tight, and punchy. We're talking about the 400 to 490 nanometer range. This is high-energy visible light, or HEV. Because these waves are so short, they don't just bounce off things, they penetrate. Now, historically, we only got this kind of intense blue light from one place, the sun. And usually we got it in a package deal with red and infrared light, which actually helped mitigate some damage. Plus, we only got it during the day. But now, we've got LEDs. Our modern lighting and screens function by pumping out a massive spike of blue light, masking it with phosphors to make it look white. So, biologically speaking, we are staring directly into a miniature, unmodulated sun, usually late at night at close range. The problem starts when this high-energy light hits the back of your eye, the retina. The retina is incredibly complex. It's actually a piece of your brain that migrated outward during development. It consumes more oxygen per gram than almost any other tissue in the body. It is an engine that runs hot, and like any high-performance engine, it produces exhaust. In biology, we call this exhaust ROS, reactive oxygen species. These are unstable molecules that love to tear electrons off other healthy molecules. This is oxidative stress. It's the biological rust I mentioned earlier. Under normal conditions, your eyes can handle this. They have antioxidants, they have repair mechanisms, but blue light changes the math. According to research published in scientific reports and studies from the University of Toledo, blue light has a unique ability to weaponize a molecule called retinal. Retinal is vital for vision. It's the chemical that catches photons. But when you hit it with continuous blue light, it triggers a chain reaction that generates massive amounts of these reactive oxygen species. It turns the very thing you need to see into a toxin. It's like filling your car with gas, but instead of burning cleanly in the engine, the gas starts leaking onto the hot exhaust pipe. That is the baseline state of a retina under constant blue LED exposure, a slow, simmering chemical burn. Part 2. The sabotage of the mitochondria. So we have this oxidative stress. That's bad, but it's not necessarily fatal to the cell, unless you take out the power plant. And that is exactly what blue light does. We need to look at the mitochondria. You remember from high school biology, the powerhouse of the cell. In the retina, specifically in the photoreceptors and the retinal pigment epithelium, or RPE, the mitochondria are working overtime. Here's where it gets really interesting. Mitochondria aren't just batteries. They are light sensitive. They contain enzymes like cytochrome C oxidase that absorb specific wavelengths of light. When they absorb deep red light, they actually work better. But blue light throws a wrench in the gears. A study published in Communications Biology highlighted how blue light exposure affects mitochondrial dynamics. It disrupts the electron transport chain. Think of this chain like a bucket brigade passing energy along. Blue light causes the brigade to drop the buckets. The electrons spill out. And what do they become? More reactive oxygen species. It's a vicious cycle. The blue light creates oxidative stress directly by hitting retinal molecules, and then it breaks the mitochondria, causing them to produce even more oxidative stress. This leads to a crisis of energy. The cell is being poisoned by free radicals, and simultaneously, its energy production is tanking. It's like a ship taking on water while the engines are failing. But the cell has one more layer of defense, right? It has a repair crew. It has a maintenance shift that comes in to sweep up the mess. And this, to me, is the most critical part of the story. This is the part that artificial light really destroys. It doesn't just damage the structure, it sends the repair crew home. Part 3. The shutdown of repair machinery. Your retina is designed to undergo a massive renovation every single night. The cells that catch light, the rods and cones, burn out their tips every day. They generate a ton of waste. There's a layer of cells behind them called the retinal pigment epithelium, the RPE. Think of the RPE as the nursemaid and the garbage collector for your vision. Its job is to eat the toxic waste produced by seeing. This process is called phagocytosis. The RPE cells literally engulf the burnt-out ends of the photoreceptors and digest them. If they don't do this, the waste piles up. This waste is called lipofuscin. It's this yellow-brown gunk that accumulates with age. Now, here is the kicker. Lipofuscin is highly sensitive to blue light. It's a photosensitizer. When blue light hits this waste product, it reacts violently, creating even more heat and oxidative stress.
So if you don't clear the waste becomes a weapon. And how does blue light stop the clearing process? By hacking your circadian rhythm. We often talk about circadian rhythms in terms of sleep. Oh, I looked at my phone, so I can't fall asleep. But the circadian clock controls cellular repair too. Research from Purdue University has shown that the eye has its own internal clock, independent of the brain. This clock dictates when the RPE should start cleaning and repairing. It's a strict schedule. The heavy lifting of repair is programmed to happen in darkness. When you expose your eyes to blue light late at night, you aren't just suppressing melatonin in your brain, you are jamming the clock in your eyes. You are telling the RPE cells that it is still high noon. The signal to start the cleanup never comes. The phagocytosis, that digesting of the toxic waste, is delayed or downregulated. And let's talk about melatonin for a second. We think of it as a sleep hormone, but in the retina, melatonin is a superhero antioxidant. It's synthesized locally in the eye, and it's crucial for neutralizing those free radicals we talked about. Blue light suppresses melatonin production more effectively than any other wavelength. So, by bathing in blue light at night, you are chemically stripping the retina of its primary nighttime shield. There's another pathway involved here, something called NR2. You can think of NR2 as the master switch for the antioxidant defense system. When a cell is stressed, NR2 runs into the nucleus and screams, "Make more shields! Turn on the antioxidant genes!" Initially, when you get exposed to blue light, NR2 activates. It tries to save you. But studies suggest that under chronic, relentless exposure, the kind we get from staring at screens 10 hours a day, this system gets overwhelmed or desensitized. The NR2 pathway can't keep up. The cell stops producing enough endogenous antioxidants to counter the flood of ROS, the repair machinery, autophagy, phagocytosis, DNA repair. It all grinds to a halt. The cell is left drowning in its own metabolic waste, unable to generate energy, under constant attack from reactive oxygen. Part 4. The legacy of the light. So where does this leave us? Does looking at a smartphone for 10 minutes blind you? No, that's not how biology works. It's about the chronic load. It's about the lack of recovery. There is a lot of debate in the ophthalmology community about the link between blue light and age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. AMD is basically the end stage of what I just described. The RPE cells die from stress, the waste products accumulate into piles called drusen, and you lose your central vision. Epidemiological studies are mixed. It's hard to separate sunlight exposure from screen exposure over a lifetime. But the mechanism is undeniable. We know blue light causes oxidative stress. We know it disrupts the repair timing. The cultural impact of this is that we are effectively running a massive, uncontrolled experiment on our visual systems. We've decoupled our light exposure from the sun. We've deleted the darkness phase of our day, which is the only time our eyes can truly heal. And it's not just about getting glasses with a yellow tint, though that can help mitigate the intensity. It's about recognizing that darkness is a nutrient. Your retinal cells are desperate for downtime. They need the melatonin signal to start the night shift cleanup crew. When we deny them that, we aren't just making them tired, we are forcing them to function in a toxic environment without a hazmat suit. So the next time you're scrolling in bed, remember the rust. Remember the mitochondria struggling to hold on to their electrons. And maybe, just maybe, give the repair crew a chance to clock in. Because once those retinal cells are gone, they don't grow back.
It's 11 p.m. I'm lying in bed, doom scrolling. I know I shouldn't be. I know the blue light is bad for my sleep, but recently I read something that made me put the phone down a lot faster.
Let me guess. Was it the study about the fruit flies?
No, it wasn't the fruit flies, actually. It was this idea that blue light isn't just keeping me awake, it's actively breaking the machinery inside my cells, like physically jamming the gears.
That is a terrifyingly accurate way to put it. And it's not just jamming the gears, it's essentially suffocating the engine.
Right, but then comes the second part of what I read, which sounded almost like magic, that if you blast those same cells with a different color of light, deep red light, you can fix them. You can unjam the gears. Is that actually real science, or is that just wellness influencer hype?
It is absolutely real science. In fact, a study from University College London showed that looking at a deep red light for just 3 minutes a week, specifically in the morning, could significantly improve declining eyesight in people over 40.
3 minutes a week?
3 minutes, but the timing matters. Do it in the afternoon, nothing happens. Do it in the morning, it's like jump-starting a car battery.
Okay, that is wild. So today we are talking about photobiomodulation, which is a mouthful.
It is. Let's call it PBM.
PBM. We're going to figure out how light acts as a drug, why blue light is the villain of the specific story, and how red light might be the hero we didn't know we needed. Eloise, where do we even start? The eyeball?
We have to start smaller. We have to start inside the cell with the mitochondria.
The powerhouse of the cell.
The powerhouse of the cell. It's the meme we all remember from biology class. But think of them less as a static building and more like a combustion engine. Their job is to take the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe and turn it into ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the fuel currency your body runs on.
Okay, so mitochondria are the engine, ATP is the gasoline?
Exactly. Now, inside this engine, there's a very complex assembly line called the electron transport chain. It has 4 main stations. Electrons get passed along these stations to generate energy. The last station, station 4, is an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. This is where the magic happens. This enzyme uses oxygen to finish the job and keep the line moving.
So station 4 is crucial. It needs oxygen to work.
Right, but here enters our villain. blue light. Specifically short-wavelength, high-energy blue light, like what screens out of your phone or laptop screen.
And the 11 p.m. doom scroll light.
The very same. Now, blue light creates stress. When your cells are stressed, whether from toxins, aging, or overexposure to this high-energy light, they produce a molecule called nitric oxide.
Wait, I thought nitric oxide was good. Don't bodybuilders take supplements for that, for blood flow?
Context is everything in biology. In your blood vessels, nitric oxide signals them to relax and widen. That's good. But inside the mitochondria, specifically at station 4, it's a disaster. Nitric oxide is a bully. It competes with oxygen.
It steals oxygen's seat?
It literally steals the seat. It binds to that cytochrome C oxidase enzyme and refuses to move. So now oxygen can't get in. The assembly line stops. You stop producing ATP. Your cellular engine stalls.
And this is what you meant by suffocating the engine.
Yes, and when the engine stalls, bad things happen. Electrons start backing up and leaking out where they shouldn't. This creates reactive oxygen species, or ROS. These are free radicals. They start tearing apart the cell from the inside. It's called oxidative stress. So blue light causes the stress, which creates the nitric oxide, which clogs the machine, which causes the leak, which destroys the cell. That is a vicious cycle.
It is. And the retina, the back of your eye, has the highest concentration of mitochondria in the entire body. It is the most energy-hungry tissue you possess. So when you hammer it with blue light, those cells take a beating. They start running out of power. And when retinal cells run out of power, your vision declines. Okay, so I've jammed up my station 4 with nitric oxide. The line is stopped. Enter red light. What does it do?
This is the coolest part of photobiophysics. It turns out that cytochrome C oxidase, that station 4 enzyme, is a photoacceptor. It is biologically designed to absorb specific wavelengths of light, specifically deep red and near-infrared light.
So the engine part itself is light sensitive.
Yes. When red light hits that enzyme, it excites the electrons. This excitation physically knocks the nitric oxide out of the binding site.
It kicks the bully out of the chair.
It kicks the bully out. The nitric oxide is released, oxygen rushes back in, binds to the enzyme, and boom, the assembly line starts moving again. ATP production resumes, the cell can breathe.
That is surprisingly mechanical. It's not some vague energy healing. It's literally dislodging a molecule.
It's photochemistry. But there's actually a second mechanism that's gaining a lot of traction in the research community, and it might be even more fascinating. It has to do with the water inside the mitochondria.
Water?
So, at the very end of this energy production line, there is a microscopic motor called the ATP synthase pump. It spins, literally spins at 9,000 rotations per minute to churn out ATP.
A spinning motor inside my cells. Biology is insane.
It is, but like any motor, it struggles if the fluid it's spinning in is too thick. Inside the mitochondria, water isn't just liquid. It's interfacial water. It's sticky and viscous because it's interacting with all these crowded proteins.
Like trying to spin a propeller in honey instead of water.
Exactly. Now, recent research, including work by Professor Glenn Jeffrey at UCL, suggests that red and near-infrared light interacts with this nanostructured water. The light energy reduces the viscosity of the water.
It thins the honey.
It turns the honey back into water. The pump encounters less resistance, it spins faster, and you get a surge of energy production. It's basically lubricating the engine with light.
So we have declogging the intake valve with oxygen and lubricating the pistons with water viscosity. That's a powerful 1-2 punch.
And the result is measurable. That UCL study I mentioned, they took people aged 34 to 70. They gave them a small LED flashlight that emitted 670 nanometers, deep red light. They looked at it for 3 minutes.
Just once.
Once a week. And they found a significant improvement in color contrast sensitivity, which is a key measure of retinal aging. Some of the older participants saw a 20% improvement.
from 3 minutes of light.
But you said the timing mattered. Why morning? Why can't I do it at night before bed?
This was the twist. When they tried the same experiment in the afternoon, there was 0 improvement. None.
0? That seems weird. The chemistry should be the same, right?
You'd think so, but it turns out mitochondria have a circadian rhythm, just like we do. They aren't running at full capacity 24/7. In the morning, they are gearing up for the day's high-energy demands. They are open for business and responsive to that light signal. By the afternoon, they shift into a different phase and stop paying attention to the signal. If you try to charge a battery that's already in maintenance mode, it won't take the charge.
That is mind-blowing. It implies our cells are expecting specific light signals at specific times.
They absolutely are. And this brings us to the evolutionary problem. Noah, for millions of years, what happened when the sun came up?
It got bright? Blue light?
Eventually, yes. But sunrise? Sunrise is heavy in red and near-infrared light. That's the first signal your mitochondria got every single day for the history of our species. It was the start engine signal. It prepped the system.
And then at noon?
At noon, you get the bright blue light from the high sun. That's high energy. It's stimulating. But in nature, blue light is always accompanied by a massive amount of red and infrared invisible light. They come together. The red light balances the stress of the blue light. It repairs the damage as it happens.
And now?
Now, we sit in offices under LED bulbs. An LED bulb is almost entirely a spike of blue light. There is almost 0 red or infrared.
We've stripped out the antidote.
Exactly. We are consuming a junk light diet. It's high calorie, high energy blue, but empty nutrients, no regenerative red. We are stressing the system without providing the signal to repair it. That's why researchers call it malillumination.
So we're all just walking around with clogged mitochondria.
Essentially. And that's why this research is so exciting. It's not just about eyes. This mechanism, cytochrome C oxidase, is in every cell in your body. There's research looking at this for skin aging, for wound healing.
Actually, I heard NASA was involved in the early days of this, something about astronauts.
Yes. Back in the 90s, NASA was trying to grow plants in space using LED lights. They noticed that the scientists' hands, which were working under these red lights, were healing from cuts and scratches faster than normal.
No way.
Yes way. In microgravity, wound heals very slowly. It's a huge problem for astronauts. So NASA funded research to see if these LEDs could boost human cell regeneration. And they found that yes, red light could speed up the healing of diabetic ulcers, burns, and severe wounds.
From growing space lettuce to healing diabetic ulcers, that is a trajectory.
It really started even earlier, in 1967, with a Hungarian researcher named Endre Mester. He was trying to test if lasers caused cancer. He shaved some rats and blasted them with a low-power red laser.
I feel like shaved rats is the start of every great medical discovery.
It often is. He expected the rats to get tumors or skin damage. Instead, the hair grew back faster on the treated rats than the untreated ones, and the skin healed better. He accidentally discovered photobiomodulation.
So if this works for eyes and skin, what about the brain? You mentioned the retina is part of the brain, basically.
It is. The retina is the only part of the central nervous system you can see from the outside. And this is the new frontier. There is ongoing research into using near-infrared light, which can penetrate through bone and skull to treat neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Wait, you can shine a light through your skull?
You can. Red light penetrates a few millimeters, but near-infrared, around 800 to 1,000 nanometers, goes much deeper. It can reach the cortex. The theory is that if you can unclog the mitochondria in neurons, unstick that station 4 enzyme, you might be able to slow down the cell death that causes dementia.
That is incredibly hopeful, but I want to be careful here. We aren't saying shine a flashlight on your head and cure Alzheimer's, right?
Absolutely not. This is still in clinical trials, but the mechanism is sound. We know mitochondrial dysfunction is a huge part of those diseases. If we can support the mitochondria, we support the brain.
Okay, so bringing this back to reality, for the listener who is sitting in an office right now, bathed in fluorescent light, staring at a screen, we can't all go live in a cave. What do we do?
You don't need to live in a cave, but you do need to feed your light diet. The simplest takeaway from Glenn Jeffries' research and others is this: get outside in the morning.
Just go outside?
Just go outside. The sun, especially early in the day, provides a massive dose of red and near-infrared light. Even on a cloudy day, the infrared gets through. It primes your mitochondria. It sets that circadian rhythm.
So that morning coffee on the porch isn't just relaxation, it's a mitochondrial tune-up.
It's a therapy session for yourselves. And if you are stuck inside, you can look into red light panels or specific devices, like the ones used in the UCL study. But nature gave us the source for free. We just stopped using it.
It's funny, we obsess over organic food and filtered water, but we consume junk light all day long without thinking about it.
Light is nutrition. That's the shift in mindset. We are photosynthetic beings in a way. We don't make food from light like plants, but we do make energy from it.
Eloise, this completely changed how I look at a light bulb. Thank you for walking us through the engine room.
My pleasure. Go get some sun.
So there you have it. The blue light is clogging the gears, and the red light is the grease that gets them moving again. Imagine for a second you have a kidney stone. It's a jagged, calcified rock sitting inside a delicate organ. 30 years ago, getting that out often meant a scalpel, a week in the hospital, and a 6-inch scar. Today, you lie in a tub of water or on a gel pad. A machine pulses against your back for 45 minutes, and you go home. The stone is gone, turned to dust. We accept this as normal medical procedure. We call it lithotripsy. But if I told you that the same force used to pulverize that rock, sound, could also knit a broken bone back together, or scrub the plaque out of an Alzheimer's brain, or potentially deliver chemotherapy without a needle, you'd probably look at me like I was trying to sell you magic crystals. We are perfectly comfortable with light as medicine. Lasers for eyes, UV for skin, but sound still feels a bit woo-woo, a bit Enya in a spa. Today, we are looking at the hard science of acoustic medicine, from the accidental discovery by aircraft engineers to the frontier of brain surgery without a knife. I'm Noah, and this is the deep dive into the healing frequency. Joining me is Dr. Eloise Vance, a biomedical engineer who specializes in therapeutic ultrasound and bioacoustics. Eloise, welcome.
Thanks, Noah. It's great to be here to make some noise.
So I want to start with that kidney stone example because it's the one piece of sound healing that is undeniably mainstream medicine. How do we get from listening to music to smashing rocks inside the body?
It's actually a fantastic story of accidental discovery. It starts in the 1960s and 70s at Dornier, the German aircraft manufacturer. They were testing supersonic jets, and they noticed something strange happening to the prototypes. As these planes approached the speed of sound, the moisture droplets in the air, rain essentially, were hitting the metal fuselage and creating these tiny crater-like pits. The shock waves from the water droplets were literally pitting the metal.
Wait, so rain was destroying supersonic jets?
Exactly. The physics of that collision created a shockwave strong enough to damage aerospace-grade alloy. And some brilliant, slightly eccentric engineer looked at that and thought, if a shockwave can pit metal, what could it do to a kidney stone?
That is a massive leap of logic. My plane is broken, let's fix a kidney.
It is, isn't it? But it worked. They developed the first lithotripter in the early 80s, the HM3. It was nicknamed the bathtub because the patient literally sat in a water bath to conduct the sound waves. They sparked an electrode underwater, focused the shockwave, and boom. The stone crumbled, but the soft tissue around it remained unharmed. That was the moment sound stopped being just about communication or art and became a surgical tool.
Okay, so that's high-intensity sound. It's violent. It's a sledgehammer. But the emerging field you're working in isn't about destruction. It's about regeneration. I read about this device called Exogen, which is FDA approved for bone healing. How does sound fix a broken leg?
Right, so lithotripsy is high-energy shock waves. Bone healing uses lipase, low-intensity pulsed Ultrasound. It's completely silent, you can't feel it, but down at the cellular level, it's doing something profound called mechanotransduction.
Mechanotransduction. That's a $5 word. Break that down.
Okay. Think of a cell not as a balloon filled with water, but as a tent with a complex internal frame, the cytoskeleton. When you apply a specific acoustic vibration, you are physically shaking that tent. On the surface of the cell, there are receptors called integrins. Think of them like doorbells.
Doorbells.
Yes, the sound wave physically jiggles the doorbell. The cell senses this mechanical vibration and translates it into a chemical signal. It tells the cell nucleus, hey, we need to build. It triggers the production of proteins like VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, which builds new blood vessels, and it tells osteoblasts to lay down new bone.
So it's not magic, you're literally shaking the cell into doing its job.
Precisely. It's a physical force acting as a biological switch. The Exogen device, for example, speeds up fresh fracture healing by about 38%. It works on non-unions, bones that have just given up trying to heal. You strap this device on for 20 minutes a day, and the sound waves wake those cells up.
That is wild. It's like shaking a sleeping person to wake them up, but the person is a bone cell. Now, let's pivot to the brain, because this is where I feel like we're entering sci-fi territory. I've seen studies out of MIT about using sound to treat Alzheimer's. Is this real?
It is very real, and it's fascinating. This is the work of Dr. Li Huizai and her team. They've been looking at something called gamma entrainment. See, your brain waves oscillate at different frequencies. Gamma waves, around 40 hertz or 40 cycles per second, are associated with high-level cognitive functioning, memory, and attention. In Alzheimer's patients, we see a deficit in these 40 hertz rhythms.
So the orchestra of the brain is out of sync.
Exactly. The conductor is asleep. So the MIT team asked, what if we force the brain back into that rhythm? They used light flickering at 40 hertz and sound, a low rhythmic buzzing tone, at 40 hertz. What they found in mice models was incredible. It didn't just improve memory, it physically reduced the amyloid plaque load in the brain.
Wait, the sound removed the physical plaque? How?
This goes back to the immune system. The brain has its own janitors called microglia. In Alzheimer's, the microglia kind of go on strike. They stop cleaning up the amyloid junk. The 40 hertz stimulation seems to kick these microglia into high gear. They change shape, they become active, and they start eating the plaque again. It's like the sound is the foreman blowing the whistle, telling the cleanup crew to get back to work.
That is unbelievable. So we're not just stimulating neurons, we're activating the immune system through sound.
Correct. And clinical trials are ongoing in humans right now. It's non-invasive, no drugs, no surgery, just light and sound.
I have to play devil's advocate here, Eloise, because if I go on YouTube right now and search healing frequencies, I get millions of videos promising that 528 hertz will repair my DNA, or 432 hertz will align my chakras. Where do we draw the line between this rigorous MIT science and, well, the placebo effect?
That is the most important question in this field. The internet loves a magic number. The idea that 528 hertz specifically repairs DNA is, frankly, pseudoscience. There's no biophysical mechanism that explains why that specific pitch would edit a gene. The difference between what I do and the wellness side of things is mechanism and dose.
Mechanism and dose.
Yes. When we use ultrasound for bone healing or focused ultrasound for the brain, we are measuring the acoustic pressure in megapascals. We know exactly how much energy is hitting the tissue. We know the biological pathway, like the integrins we talked about. The YouTube videos are great for relaxation, and stress reduction is healing, don't get me wrong. But listening to a tone isn't the same as targeting a tumor with focused acoustic energy.
Speaking of targeting tumors, or rather targeting the brain, there's another application involving bubbles that blew my mind. Can you explain how you're using sound to smuggle drugs into the brain?
The blood-brain barrier disruption. This is my favorite. So the blood-brain barrier, or BBB, is a protective wall of cells that lines the blood vessels in your brain. It keeps toxins out, which is good, but it also keeps medicine out. 98% of potential drugs for Alzheimer's or brain cancer can't cross that wall.
It's too effective a security guard.
Exactly. So here's the trick. We inject microscopic bubbles, microbubbles, smaller than red blood cells, into the bloodstream. They're inert,
harmless gas bubbles. Then we aim a focused ultrasound beam at a specific spot in the brain. When the sound waves hit those bubbles inside the capillaries, the bubbles start to oscillate. They expand and contract.
Like little breathing lungs.
Or little crowbars. As they expand, they physically push against the vessel walls and gently pry apart the tight junctions between the cells. For a few hours, the door is open. We can slip in chemotherapy, immunotherapy, or antibodies that would normally be blocked. Then the bubbles dissolve, the sound stops, and the barrier snaps shut.
That is incredibly precise. You're using sound as a key to a specific lock.
And we can target it to the millimeter. If a patient has a tumor in the temporal lobe, we open the barrier only there. The rest of the brain stays protected. This is already in clinical trials for glioblastoma and Alzheimer's.
Seems like we're moving toward a future where surgery doesn't involve cutting. I mean, we started with Pythagoras, right? He was using music to treat humors in ancient Greece. And now we're vibrating microbubbles.
We are, and while we distinguish between the woo-woo and the science, we shouldn't dismiss the history. The Egyptians used sistrums, these rattles, in healing ceremonies. We recently found that some of those rattles actually generate ultrasound frequencies when shaken hard enough. Aboriginal cultures used the yidaki, or didgeridoo, for 40,000 years to heal muscle pain. The low-frequency vibration of a didgeridoo is basically primitive vibroacoustic therapy.
Wait, hold on. You're saying the didgeridoo is basically the exogen bone healer?
In a very crude sense, yes. It produces low-frequency vibrations around 60 to 100 hertz, which penetrates deep into tissue. We now know that specific frequency range helps with circulation and pain relief. So the ancients had the intuition and the observation. They just didn't have the molecular biology to explain why it worked. Now we do.
That's a humbling thought. We're just catching up to the Aboriginal healers with our million-dollar machines. So, Eloise, where does this go in 10 years? If sound is this powerful, why aren't we all using sonic pills?
I think the future is incisionless surgery. We are looking at a world where we can ablate a tumor deep in the liver, treat essential tremors in Parkinson's, which we can already do, by the way, using high-intensity focused ultrasound, or HIFU, to burn out the specific neurons causing the tremor, and deliver drugs to the brain, all as outpatient procedures. No infection risk, no recovery time.
It sounds like Star Trek, the tricorder.
It really is. We are moving from the era of chemical pharmacology, pills, to electroceuticals and acoustic medicine. It's about understanding that the body isn't just a bag of chemicals. It's a physical structure that responds to resonance, pressure, and frequency.
And I guess the takeaway here is that frequency isn't just a buzzword for a meditation retreat. It's a fundamental instruction language for our cells.
Absolutely. Our cells are listening. We just finally learned how to speak their language.
Eloise, this has been mind-bending. Thank you for walking us through the noise.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening.
That was Dr. Eloise Vance. It's wild to think that the same force that can shatter a kidney stone can also gently coax a brain cell to clean up after itself. It makes you wonder what else we're missing just because we can't see it.
The instrument being played is traditionally known as the yidaki. The player is using a technique called circular breathing, inhaling through the nose while simultaneously pushing air out through the mouth using the cheek muscles. This creates an uninterrupted, continuous sound wave. It is a drone that never breaks. Now, imagine a warrior has been brought into the circle. He has a compounded fracture in his leg, or perhaps a deep muscle tear from a hunt. The healer doesn't just play the yidaki for the warrior to hear. He places the end of the heavy eucalyptus tube directly against the injured limb. He targets the sound. For thousands of years, Aboriginal healers claimed this practice could mend broken bones and knit torn muscle. For a long time, Western medicine dismissed this as folklore, the placebo effect, the power of suggestion. But then scientists started measuring the frequencies. When you analyze the acoustic output of a traditional yidaki, you find that it produces a fundamental frequency ranging roughly between 50 and 100 hertz. But it's not just a single note. It's a complex, rich texture of harmonics. Why does that number, 50 to 100 hertz, matter? Because in the last few decades, bioacoustic researchers have discovered something incredible about human physiology. Bones are piezoelectric. That sounds complex, but it simply means that when you apply mechanical stress or vibration to bone, it generates a tiny electrical charge. This charge signals the body to build more bone density. It's why astronauts lose bone mass in zero gravity. They lack the vibration of walking on Earth. Modern medicine now uses machines called bone growth stimulators to treat non-union fractures, bones that refuse to knit back together. And do you know what frequency those high-tech hospital machines use? They pulse at frequencies often between 50 and 75 hertz. The Aboriginal healers weren't just playing a song, they were administering a specific, verifiable dose of vibratory medicine. They were turning the yidaki into a biomechanical catalyst, using the low-frequency sound pressure to trigger the body's own repair mechanisms. The magic was actually physics. And the benefits of this instrument extend beyond the person being healed. Let's look at the player. To maintain that continuous drone, the yidaki player must master their own airway. They have to strengthen the muscles of the upper throat to act as a bellows. In 2005, a study published in the British Medical Journal took a group of people suffering from obstructive sleep apnea, a condition where the throat muscles collapse during sleep, cutting off air. They prescribed them lessons on the didgeridoo. The results were undeniable. The playing strengthened the airway muscles so effectively that their sleep apnea significantly improved. The ancient wind instrument was quite literally a workout for the respiratory system, a cure for the breathless. Now, let's travel roughly 8,000 miles northwest and jump forward in time to around 2000 BC. We are leaving the red dust of Australia for the cool stone shadows of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in ancient Egypt. The atmosphere here is different. It is enclosed. The air is heavy with the scent of Kaifi incense. You are walking through a hypostyle hall, a forest of massive stone columns that rise up into the darkness. Carved onto the walls are reliefs of priestesses. In their hands, they hold an object that looks like a cross between a tuning fork and a rattle. It has a handle, a U-shaped metal frame, and crossbars strung with loose metal discs. This is the sistrum. If you look at Hollywood movies, the sistrum is just a musical toy, a tambourine used to keep rhythm during a dance. But in the Egyptian worldview, the sistrum was sacred to Hathor, the goddess of music, beauty, and healing. It was used in the incantation of the mother. And when we look closer at the construction of this instrument, we find another instance of accidental or perhaps intentional high technology. When a priestess shook the sistrum, the metal discs would crash against the metal frame. We hear the jingle, but there is a sound we don't hear. A study on the acoustics of the sistrum revealed that the metal-on-metal impact generates a significant amount of ultrasound, sound frequencies far above the range of human hearing, specifically in the range of 40 to 60 kilohertz. In the modern world, we know ultrasound very well. We use it for imaging babies in the womb, but we also use it therapeutically. Therapeutic ultrasound is used by physical therapists every day to treat soft tissue injuries, reduce inflammation, and increase blood flow. It works by vibrating the tissue at a cellular level, creating heat and energy that speeds up the healing process. There's even research into using high-intensity ultrasound to break up kidney stones and kill cancer cells. So picture the scene in the healing sanatorium of the temple. A sick pilgrim is lying on a stone bench. The priestess stands over them, shaking the sistrum rhythmically near their body. To the observer, it is a ritual cleansing, a shaking away of bad spirits. But physically, the pilgrim is being bathed in a cloud of ultrasonic frequencies. The hiss of the sistrum was delivering a microscopic massage to their inflamed tissues. The Egyptians didn't need an electrical outlet to generate ultrasound. They just needed the specific alloy of bronze and the kinetic energy of the priestess's wrist. But the Egyptians didn't stop at handheld instruments. They turned their entire architecture into a healing device. This brings us to the concept of archaeoacoustics, the study of sound in archaeology. If you have ever stood in a tiled bathroom and hummed a note, you know how the room amplifies the sound. Now, imagine that effect engineered on a monumental scale. The healing chapels at the Temple of Dendera and Deir al-Bahari were constructed with specific dimensions and materials, often red granite and limestone. These surfaces are highly refractive to sound. They don't absorb vibration, they bounce it back. The chambers were often long, narrow, and had parallel walls. This design creates a phenomenon known as a standing wave. Acoustics engineer John Stuart Reid conducted a famous series of experiments inside the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber. He set up a speaker and a membrane stretched over a pipe sprinkled with sand, a device called a cymoscope, which makes sound visible. As he played different frequencies, the sand would arrange itself into complex geometric patterns. But something else happened. Reid reported that when he lay in the sarcophagus and made a low glissando tone with his voice, the entire room seemed to lock in to the frequency. He described feeling the sound wash over him, not just as noise, but as a physical pressure. Reid actually went into the pyramid with a severe lower back injury. He was in pain, but after spending time in that sarcophagus, resonating with the chamber's prime frequency, he reported that his pain vanished. He hypothesized that the intense resonance of the granite chamber acted like a whole-body tuning fork, stimulating the body's healing response much like the yidaki does. The Egyptians called their granite mashet, which meant the stone of God. It has a high quartz crystal content. Quartz is piezoelectric, just like bone. When the sound waves hit the granite walls, the crystals in the rock are put under stress, theoretically generating an electromagnetic field. So the patient in the healing chamber wasn't just hearing a chant. They were immersed in a soup of acoustic resonance and subtle electromagnetic fields. The room itself was the medicine.
We have talked about bones and tissues, but what about the mind? Because you cannot heal the body if the mind is in a state of stress or panic. Both the Aboriginal Australians and the ancient Egyptians, and indeed the shamans of Mongolia, the monks of Tibet, and the drummers of West Africa understood the power of rhythm to alter the state of the brain. This is where we enter the realm of neuroscience in a concept called brainwave entrainment. The human brain operates at different frequencies depending on what we are doing. When we are awake and alert, we are in beta state, fast, erratic waves. When we are stressed, those waves get even faster. But deep healing, immune system regeneration, and creative insight happen in the slower states, alpha and theta. Theta waves, which oscillate at about 4 to 7 cycles per second, are the gateway to the subconscious. It's that twilight state you feel just before you fall asleep. It is also the state where the body does its most profound repair work. Ancient drumming rituals almost universally utilize a tempo of around 4 to 7 beats per second. This isn't a coincidence, it's biology. When the ear hears that rhythmic pulse, whether it's a drum beat or the oscillating drone of the didgeridoo, the brain wants to synchronize with it. It's a phenomenon called the frequency-following response. In a study conducted at the Max Planck Institute, researchers placed experienced shamanic practitioners into an fMRI machine. They played them rhythmic drumming tracks. The scans showed something remarkable. As the trancing began, the activity in the auditory pathway of the brain, the part that processes sound, actually decreased. The brain stopped analyzing the sound as noise and started using it as a carrier wave. Simultaneously, the connectivity in the posterior cingulate cortex, a hub associated with internal thought and self-awareness, increased massive amounts of connectivity. The drummer wasn't just making music, he was using an external rhythm to force the brain to switch gears, dropping the listener out of the stress-filled beta state and into the healing trance-like theta state. They were hacking the nervous system using nothing but tempo.
This leads us to a profound realization about the ancient world. We often view their reliance on sound as a limitation. We think they chanted because they didn't have pills. We think they drummed because they didn't have surgery. But the evidence suggests that they cultivated these sonic technologies because they understood that we are, at our core, vibrational beings. Every cell in your body has a resonant frequency, every organ, every bone. When that frequency is disrupted by trauma or disease, the body falls out of tune. Modern bioacoustics is essentially the science of finding the right note to bring the body back into harmony. But the ancients didn't need oscilloscopes or fMRI machines to find that note. They found it through thousands of years of deep listening. They found it by feeling the vibration of a hollow log against a broken leg. They found it by noticing how the hiss of a sistrum calmed a feverish child. So the next time you hear the deep, earthy drone of a didgeridoo or the rhythmic rattle of a shaker, don't just listen with your ears. Listen with your bones. Feel the history of 1,000 healers standing behind that sound, reminding us that sometimes the most advanced medicine is the one you can hear.
Retinal cell biology. Exposure to blue light reduces melanopsin expression in intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells and damages the inner retina in rats. Natalia Ziolkowska, 1. Malgorzata Chmielewska Kresinska, 2. Ala Winiarska, 3. and Waldemar Sienkiewicz, 4. 1 Department of Histology and Embryology, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Warmia and Mazary, in Olsztyn, Poland. 2 Department of Pathophysiology, Forensic Veterinary and Administration, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Warmia and Mazary, in Olsztyn, Poland. 3 Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, Stepan Gzhitsky National University of Veterinary and Biotechnologies, Lviv, Ukraine. 4 Department of Animal Anatomy, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Warmia and Mazary, in Olsztyn, Poland. Correspondence: Natalia Ziolkowska, Department of Histology and Embryology, Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, University of Warmia and Mazary, in Olsztyn. Oksapowskiego, 13 Str. 10 to 693, Olsztyn, Poland. Natalia.Terezaska at uwm.edu.pl received September 9th, 2021. Accepted. December 24th, 2021. Published January 21st, 2022. Citation: Ziolkowska N., Chmielewska Kresinska, M., Winiarska A., Sienkiewicz W. Exposure to blue light reduces melanopsin expression in intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells and damages the inner retina in rats. Invest Ophthalmal Visci. 2022-631. doi.org/10.167/IOVs.63.126. The purpose of this study was to investigate the effects of blue light on intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, iPRGCs. Methods: brown Norway rats were used. 9 rats were continuously exposed to blue light, light-emitting diodes, LDs, 463 nanometers, 1000 LX. For 2 days. Acute exposure, AE. 9 rats were exposed to 12 hours of blue light and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days, long-term exposure, LTE. 6 control rats were exposed to 12 hours of white fluorescent light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Whole mount retinas were immunolabeled with melanopsin antibodies, melanopsin positive, MP. iPRGC somas and processes were counted and measured with neuron J. To detect apoptosis, retinal cryosections were stained with terminal deoxynucleotidal transferase DO-P-NICEND labeling. Ultra-thin sections were visualized with transmission electron microscopy. Results: the number of MP-iPRGC somas was significantly lower in retinas from A&E and LTE rats than in those from control rats, p less than 0.001 and equal to 0.002 respectively. The mean length of MP areas of processes was significantly lower in A&E rats, p less than 0.001. A&E rats had severe retinal damage and massive apoptosis in the outer nuclear layer. Their mitochondria were damaged in the axons and dendrites of the nerve fiber layer and the inner plexiform layer. Retinal ganglion cells, RGCs, in AE rats appeared to have reduced amounts of free ribosomes and rough endoplasmic reticulum. Conclusions. A&E to blue light reduces melanopsin expression and damages RGCs, likely including IPRGCs. Changes in the axons and dendrites of RGCs suggest possible disruption of intraretinal and extraretinal signal transmission. Keywords: melanopsin, rat, blue light, intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, retinal damage. As the use of devices emitting blue-enriched light has increased, so have concerns about its negative effects on the retina. 1. 2. Excessive exposure to blue light can cause insomnia and transient smartphone blindness, damage the retina, and threaten vision. 2.7. In general, the retina is most sensitive to shorter wavelength light, which causes damage that is primarily photochemical in nature. Blue light causes photoreceptor death and retinal gliosis, which leads to retinal degeneration. 4-7. 9-14. Blue light exposure may also affect intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs, as these cells contain melanopsin, a photopigment with peak absorbance at around 480 nanometers. The IPRGCs play roles in image-forming responses 1617 and in non-image-forming responses 1.7. In the rat retina, these neurons constitute about 1% to 3% of the RGC population and are most concentrated in the superotemporal region. 18.19 decreases the number of IPRGCs in the rat retina by downregulating melanopsin expression and changes melanopsin localization within these cells. However, even though it is known that blue light-emitting diodes can be more damaging to the retina than white or green light, 451,314 the effects of monochromatic blue light exposure on rat IPRGCs have not been investigated. The IPRGCs could be particularly susceptible to blue light irradiation because their axons are unshielded by myelin and laden with mitochondria. Mitochondrial enzymes are affected by blue light, which can lead to generation of. This work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4 international license. 1. Blue light reduces melanopsin expression, IOVs, or January 2022 Volley 63 or NOBA 1, or Article 26 or 2, reactive oxygen species and affect axonal transport and the survival of IPRGCs, 24-26. Moreover, the only studies involving long-term exposure to blue light have investigated its effects on photoreceptors, 9.27, not IPRGCs. For this reason, more long-term studies on animal models are needed. Additionally, in studies on the effects of exposure to high-intensity white light on IPRGCs, only albino rats were used. However, light-induced retinal degeneration differs in pigmented and albino rats, as does regulation of melanopsin mRNA and protein expression. As does response of IPRGCs to light exposure may also differ between these strains, but studies on pigmented rats are needed to provide a basis for comparison. Therefore, our objective was to determine the effects of acute and long-term exposure to blue light, 1000 LX, on the retinas of pigmented rats, with a particular focus on IPRGCs. To examine and count IPRGCs in whole-mount retinas, we used immunolabeling for melanopsin. For measuring the length of IPRGC processes, we used NeuronJ. We supplemented these techniques with electron microscopy, and for labeling apoptotic cells, we used terminal deoxynucleotidyl transferase DuTP nickend labeling, TUNEL. Methods: animals and experimental design. 3-month-old male and female brown Norway rats, Charles River Laboratories, were used. All rats were kept in 12 hours of white fluorescent light and 12 hours of darkness for the first 3 months of life. Fluorescent lamps provided white light, less than or equal to 100 LX. Then, the acute exposure, A&E, group 9 rats, was first kept in total darkness for 24 hours, and then continuously exposed to blue light for 48 hours. The long-term exposure, LTE, group 9 rats, was exposed to 12 hours of blue light and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. The control group, 6 rats, was kept in 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. To dilate the rats' pupils in all 3 groups, 1. Atropine drops were applied twice a day. All rats were kept in transparent plexiglass cages, supplementary Fig. S1. Blue light was provided by clusters of light-emitting diodes, LEDs, 463. 10 nanometers, 400 blue diodes per cage. 50 diodes provide 16,000 lumen, 5 meters to. White and blue LED illumination was measured at the level of the rat's eyes with a monochromatic light meter, multi-LED 10 Mars. Taiwan. Supplementary Figure S1 shows other details of the experimental system. All rats were euthanized at 8 a.m. in a CO2 chamber. All experimental procedures were performed according to Ukrainian animal welfare regulations and were approved by the Poltava National Agricultural Academy Ethical Commission. Rat retina whole mounts were prepared as in Dreising et al. 31 briefly. The eyes were enucleated immediately after euthanasia. Next, the retina was gently dissected from the eye cup and fixed in 4% paraformaldehyde for 45 minutes, then washed in PBS. For immunocytochemistry, the tissues were incubated for 48 hours with an antibody against melanopsin, 1/20th dilution, ABCAM 19,383, in 0.1 millions phosphate buffer, containing 2% BSA and 0.1% tween. After 3 15-minute rinses, in 0.1 millions phosphate buffer, the tissues were incubated with secondary antibody, 1/20 dilution, Alexa 568, in 0.1. Immunostaining. M-phosphate buffer for 3 hours. Retinas were washed with PBS, then mounted in Gelvatol mounting medium containing Dabco, Sigma, Germany, and Floramount, G32. Counting of IPRGC somas and determination of melanopsin-positive neural process lengths. Melanopsin-positive IPRGC somas in entire whole mounts were counted manually with image J151N software 33. To determine neural process lengths, 4 images from the temporal retina were randomly selected from each retina and opposed 1.28 Hoffice MM2 composite image. The same was done with 4 images from the nasal retina, for a total area of 2.560 mm2. Melanopsin immunoreactive nerve fibers were traced manually with neuron J34% for image J, and the length of all the fibers in the 2.560 mm2 area was summed. The IPRGC somas numbers in this area were also counted manually with image J tunnel assay. For apoptosis detection, a tunnel assay was performed using an in situ cell death detection kit, Roche Diagnostics GmbH Mannheim, Germany, according to the manufacturer's instructions. 8 cross-sections of each retina were examined. Supplementary table S1. Tunnel-positive nuclei were counted manually in a 1,000 micrometers long area of each section. In cases where nuclei may have fragmented, each potential fragment was counted as an individual nucleus. Electron microscopy. For electron microscopy, the dorsal half of retinas was collected within 3 minutes of heart stoppage. See supplementary table S1. Tissue pieces were fixed. 2 hours, 4 degrees Celsius, in a mixture of 1% paraformaldehyde and 2.5% glutaraldehyde in 0.2 millions phosphate buffer. pH 7.4. Samples were washed, post-fixed in 2% osmium tetroxide, 2 hours at room temperature, and embedded in EPON 812. Semi-thin sections were stained with toluidine blue and examined to identify regions for electron microscopy. Ultra-thin sections were contrasted with uranyl acetate and lead citrate, then examined using a Techni 12 Spirit G 2 biotwin transmission electron microscope. TEM, FE, USA. 5 to 7 cross-sections of each retina were examined by TEM. Statistical analyses. Differences in IPRGC soma numbers and melanopsin-positive neural process lengths were analyzed with Tukey's HSD. R4.435. Sensitivity analysis with trimmed means 36. indicated that the results were minimally affected by potential deviations from normality and heteroscedasticity. Results. Exposure to blue light reduced the number of melanopsin-positive IPRGC somas in rat retinas. The A&E and LTE groups had significantly fewer melanopsin-positive IPRGC somas in the retina than the control group. Figure 1. Although the AE group had significantly fewer of these somas in the retina than the LTE group, the 95% confidence interval, CI, for the difference included values near zero. Similar results were observed in the smaller 2.56 via M&U. Blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs, or January 2022, or vol. No one, or Article 26. Figure 1. Blue light exposure reduced the number of intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs. Brown Norway rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats. 12 hours blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. Red fluorescence shows staining for melanopsin. A. Control group. B. Long-term exposure group. And C. Acute exposure group. D. Circles indicate number of IPRGCs in one complete whole-mount retina from one rat. Horizontal lines show mean. E. Dots indicate differences between groups with regard to mean counts of IPRGCs in whole-mount retinas. Error bars show 95% confidence intervals for the differences. The p-values and confidence intervals were calculated with Tukey's HSD test, R, version 4.0.4, after sensitivity analysis, indicated that deviations from the assumptions of normality and homogeneous variance would not affect conclusions about the statistical significance of differences. Area that was used for measuring neural process lengths, see below, Figure 2. The AE group had significantly fewer melanopsin-positive IPRGC somas than the LTE and control groups, and the LTE group had significantly fewer of these somas than the control group. Acute exposure to blue light changed melanopsin distribution in IPRGCS. Melanopsin distribution in IPRGCS was similar in the control and the LTE groups but differed in the AE group. The intensity of staining in the somas and processes was less intense in the A&E group. In the A&E group, immunoreactivity to melanopsin was sometimes limited to soma membranes. In most processes in the A&E group, the staining did not extend as far from the soma as it did in the other groups, see Figs. 2AF. In the A&E group, melanopsin expression was reduced mostly in the outer stratifying dendrites of the inner plexiform layer, see Figure 2F. Although melanopsin-positive varicosities were present on the processes in all three groups, they were less frequent and less prominent in the A&E group, see Figs. 2E, 2F. Acute exposure to blue light reduced the mean length of IPRGC neural processes in rat retinas. The mean length of melanopsin-positive IPRGC neural processes in the examined 2.560 mm2 areas was significantly lower in the A&E group than in the LTE and control groups, Figure 3. The mean length of these nerve fibers was similar in the LTE and control groups. Retinal damage after blue light exposure. Clear signs of retinal damage were visible in the A&E group. Some retinal abnormalities were detected in the LTE group, and no retinal abnormalities were seen in the control group. Light microscopy revealed that the photoreceptor layer had deteriorated in A&E retinas, Figure 4C, but not in LT retinas, Figure 4B. In AN retinas, the outer nuclear layer had disappeared, and only scattered nuclei were present, Figure 4C. In those scattered nuclei, indicators of apoptosis were present, for example chromatin condensation, see Figure 4C. Although the outer and inner photoreceptor segments were visible in most regions of A&E samples, compared to the other groups, they were usually less numerous and shrunken, see Figure 4C. In. Blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs, or January 2022 vol. 63 or number 1 or Article 26. 4. Figure 2. Effect of blue light exposure on melanopsin distribution in intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs, in whole-mount retinas from brown Norway rats. The rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats, 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. A. Control group, 20X. Note, dense network of melanopsin-positive dendrites. B. Control group, 40X. Multiple melanopsin-positive processes with varicosities are visible. C. Long-term exposure group, 20X. A widespread dendritic network of melanopsin-positive processes is visible. Note the smaller number of melanopsin-positive IPRGC somas. D. Long-term exposure group, 40X. Multiple melanopsin-positive varicosities are also visible here. Note, 2 melanopsin immunoreactive cells located in the ganglion cell layer, arrow, and in the inner nuclear layer, double arrow. E. Acute exposure group, 20X. Note, levels of melanopsin expression differ widely in the IPRGC somas. Relative to the other groups, melanopsin immunoreactivity is decreased in the dendrites, and the melanopsin-positive varicosities on the nerve fibers are less prominent. F. Acute exposure group, 40X. Melanopsin is present mostly in IPRGC somas and proximal dendrites. Note, lack of varicosities on these processes and decreased melanopsin immunoreactivity in outer stratifying dendrites, arrows. Samples were visualized with a confocal microscope, LSM 700, Zeiss, G. Circles indicate number of IPRGCs in a 2.5 per 6, 0 mm2 area of one retina from one rat. Horizontal lines show mean. E. Dots indicate differences between groups with regard to mean counts of IPRGCs. Error bars show 95% confidence intervals for the differences. The AE group, signs of apoptosis were occasionally present, for example chromatin condensation and marginalization. See Figure 4C. Control and LTE samples in contrast, the outer and inner segments had normal morphology. In the A&E group, but not in the control and LTE groups, see Figs 4A, 4B, the inner plexiform layer and the nerve fiber layer were thick and vacuolized. See Figure 4C. In the inner nuclear layers, INLs, in electron micrographs, the outer nuclear layer looked normal in the LTE and control groups. Figs 5A, 5B, in blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs, or January 2022, or Volley. No one, or Article 26, 5, Figure 3. Acute exposure to blue light reduced the mean length of processes of intrinsically photoreceptive retinal ganglion cells, IPRGCs. Brown Norway rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats, 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. A. Circles indicate total length of IPRGC processes in a 2.560 mm2 area of the retina from one rat. Horizontal line shows mean. B. Dots indicate differences between groups. Error bars show 95% confidence intervals for the differences. Figure 4. Effect of blue light exposure on retinal morphology of brown Norway rats. The rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats, 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. Resin-embedded semi-thin sections were stained with toluidine blue. Retinas from control, A, and long-term, B, exposure groups display normal morphology. C, retinas from the acute exposure group had deteriorated. Note, Loss of nuclei in the outer nuclear layer. Photoreceptors are shrunken and sparser than in the other groups. Signs of apoptosis, chromatin condensation and marginalization are present in the inner nuclear layer, double arrow. The inner plexiform layer and nerve fiber layer are thicker than in the control group and display vacuolization, arrows. Note the pigment granules scattered in the outer nuclear layer, arrowheads. Samples were visualized with a confocal microscope, LSM 700, Zeiss. The A&E group, however, there were markedly fewer nuclei in this layer, and cells displayed signs of different stages of apoptosis, pycnotic nuclei containing mostly heterochromatin, vacuolized nuclei, and nuclei that had collapsed, see Figure 5c. Most of the inner segments looked normal in the LTE and control groups, see Figs. 5D, 5E. In the A&E group, most inner segments had disrupted cell membranes and swollen mitochondria, see Figure 5F. Photoreceptor outer segments were commonly disarranged in the A&E group, and sometimes blue light reduces melanopsin expression. 6. IOVs or January 2022, Vol. 63 or Number 1, or Article 26. Figure 5. Electron micrographs of retinas from brown Norway rats. The rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats, 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. Normal-looking outer nuclear layers, ONL, in, A, control, and B, long-term exposure groups. C. ONL from acute exposure group. Note: nuclei are sparser. Stages of apoptosis are evident. Star equal to pycnosis. Asterisk equal to chromatin pycnosis and vacuolization. And arrowhead equal to collapsed nuclei. And multiple processes of Muller cells are present between inner segments, arrows. Pigment granules are present between scattered nuclei, double arrow. Normal-looking photoreceptor outer and inner segments from D, control, and E, long-term exposure groups. Note: some outer segments are disarranged, arrows. F. Inner segments from acute exposure group have disrupted membranes and swollen mitochondria, arrows. Note: vacuolization of the transition zone between photoreceptor inner and outer segments, arrowheads. Ultrathin sections were visualized using a Techni 12 Spirit G2 biotwin transmission electron microscope, FE, USA, equipped with 2 digital cameras, a Velita, Olympus, Japan, and an EGE 4K, FE, USA. Disarranged in the other 2 groups. In AE retinas, most of the rod outer segments had disarranged discs, and vacuoles were present at the transition zone between the inner and outer photoreceptor segments. See Figs. 5C, 5F. Multiple Muller cell processes were present in the subretinal space of A&E rats, but not in retinas from the other rats. In A&E retinas, these processes extended between inner photoreceptor segments. See Figure 5C. In the A&E group, the nerve fiber layer and the inner plexiform layer showed signs of damage. Figs. 6, Sig, 6, I. They were vacuolized, and the mitochondria in axons and dendrites were markedly swollen and had disrupted cristae. However, in the LTE and control groups, these layers looked normal. See Figs. 6A, 6 billions, 6 grams, 6 hours. Finally, ganglion cells appeared normal in control and LTE rats. See Figs. 6D, 6E. In A&E rats, these cells had swollen mitochondria and sparser ribosomes and cystins of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. See Figure 6F, Tunnel assay for apoptosis. In control retinas, only isolated apoptosis signals were detected, 2 to 6 nuclei per rat. Figure 7. Supplementary Table S2. In LTA retinas, scattered individual nuclei were labeled positive in the ONL, 12 to 27 nuclei per rat. In A&E retinas, however, massive labeling was detected in the ONL, indicating widespread apoptosis of photoreceptors. Approximately 3,878 to 5,126 nuclei per rat. Note that nuclear fragmentation made exact quantification difficult. In A&E retinas, occasional positive labeling was detected in individual nuclei in the INL. Discussion. Our results indicate that LTE and A&E to blue light reduce the number of melanopsin-positive iPRGC somas in the retinas of pigmented rats. A&E, but not LTE, substantially reduces the length of melanopsin-positive iPRGC neural processes and damages photoreceptors. Whereas LTE does not appear to affect retinal ganglion cells, RGCs, AE causes lesions in the axons in the nerve fiber layer and in the dendrites in the inner plexiform layer, as well as minor changes in RGC somas. It is possible that iPRGCs may not have been detected because exposure to blue light could have reduced melanopsin expression in these cells. Thus, although we cannot be certain whether exposure to blue light reduces the number of iPRGCs or whether it downregulates melanopsin expression in these cells, our results clearly indicate that blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs or January 2022 or Vol 63 Number 1 or Article 26. Figure 6. Electron micrographs of retinas from brown Norway rats. The rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats, 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats, and blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. In the A control and B long-term exposure groups, nerve fiber layer axons and their mitochondria appear normal. C. In the acute exposure group, axons are swollen and have mitochondria with disrupted cristae, arrowheads. Somas of ganglion cells from the D, control, and E long-term exposure groups display normal ultrastructure with numerous free ribosomes and cystins of rough endoplasmic reticulum, arrows. F. Ganglion cell somas from the acute exposure group have fewer free ribosomes and cystins of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, as well as swollen mitochondria, arrow. In retinas from the G, control, and H, long-term exposure groups, the inner plexiform layer appears normal. I, in the retina from the acute exposure group, the inner plexiform layer is vacuolized. Ultrathin sections were visualized using a Techni 12 Spirit G2 biotwin transmission electron microscope, FE, USA, equipped with 2 digital cameras, a Velita, Olympus, Japan, and an EGE 4K, FE, USA. iPRGCs are affected by exposure to blue light. In future studies, a marker for all RGCs will be used to clarify the effect of blue light on the entire population of these cells and to elucidate differences in the response iPRGCs and other RGCs to blue light exposure. Our count of 900 to 1,500 iPRGCs in retina whole mounts from normal pigmented rats is consistent with the results of other studies. 181,937. Additionally, our observations that, in the LTE and AE groups, the number of iPRGC somas was reduced and that labeling for apoptosis was absent in the ganglion cell layer are similar to the findings of others, 20.21 who exposed albino rats to white light, 3,000 LX for 2 days or 200 LX for 2 to 8 days. Light and darkness regulate melanopsin expression in the retinas of pigmented 28 and albino rats. Hamsters and mice, extended exposure of rats to constant white light for 1 to 5 days downregulates melanopsin expression, resulting in a reduced number of iPRGC somas. Taken together, these studies and ours indicate that the reduction in the number of iPRGC somas was not caused by cell death, but it could be due to reduced blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs or January 2022, Vol. 63 or Number 1, or Article 26, 8, Figure 7, Tunnel assay of brown Norway rat retinas. Blue fluorescence shows nuclei stained with DAPI, The rats were exposed to 12 hours of white light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Control, 6 rats. 12 hours of blue light, 1000 LX, and 12 hours of darkness for 10 days. Long-term, 9 rats. And blue light, 1000 LX, for 2 days. Acute, 9 rats. A. Retina from a rat in the control group. Note, no labeling for apoptosis. B. Retina from a rat in the long-term exposure group. Isolated nuclei display labeling for apoptosis, white arrows equal to green fluorescence, in the ONL. C. Retina from a rat in the acute exposure group. Note, massive labeling for apoptosis is present in the ONL, white arrows equal to green fluorescence. Samples were visualized with a confocal microscope. LSM 700. Zeiss. Abbreviations: ONL, outer nuclear layer; INL, inner nuclear layer; GCL, ganglion cell layer. Detection of somas caused by decreased melanopsin protein expression. We found that A&E to blue light reduces the total length of the melanopsin-positive areas of processes. There are at least 3 factors that could explain this finding and the reduction in the density of melanopsin-positive varicosities on those processes. First, downregulation of melanopsin expression may have played a role. Hannibal et al. 28% showed that melanopsin expression was significantly reduced after a prolonged period of constant light exposure. Moreover, melanopsin protein expression is transiently downregulated in the retina of albino rats exposed to high-intensity cool white light. 20. This downregulation is probably a protective mechanism because melanopsin produces reactive oxygen species when it is activated by blue light, 41 to 43. Second, these effects of A&E to blue light on iPRGCs could be due to changes in the distribution of melanopsin, which has been shown to change in rat retinas in response to constant illumination or constant darkness. 212,838. For example, after 8 days of exposure to 200 LX of white light, melanopsin immunoreactivity was no longer detected in iPRGC processes and was seen only in their somas. Similarly, after 2 days in constant white light at 300 LX, melanopsin immunoreactivity was decreased in the distal dendritic processes. After 3 days, it was also decreased in the proximal processes, and after 5 days, it was only visible in the somas. 38. Similar changes occurred in pigmented rats continuously exposed to white light, and the changes were more prominent in the outer stratifying processes than in the inner ones. 28, as we also observed in our rats after continuous exposure to monochromatic blue light. Hannibal et al. 28 postulated that newly synthesized melanopsin is transported from the soma to the processes, and that the soma membrane may be the last place where melanopsin expression is downregulated in response to light exposure. In our rats, the mean length of melanopsin-positive processes in an area of 2.56 mnm2 was slightly longer in the LTE group than in the control group. However, the 95% CI indicates that, in all such rats, the mean length of these areas could be reduced after LTE to blue light. Thus, our data indicate that A&E reduces the mean length of melanopsin-positive areas in iPRGC processes and leaves open the possibility that LTE could also reduce their length, but to a lesser extent. Third, these effects on iPRGCs might also be due to photoreceptor damage. However, it remains unclear whether photoreceptors play a role in regulating melanopsin expression in iPRGCs. On the one hand, some studies indicate that classical photoreceptors interact with iPRGCs 3904 to 46, form synapses with bipolar and amacrine cells, suggesting that rod and cone input may be involved in regulating melanopsin expression. In mice, the outer stratifying dendrites of iPRGCs are in close proximity to cone photoreceptor terminals, which suggests a functional connection. In transgenic mice with degenerated photoreceptors, melanopsin expression was undetectable. Additionally, 1 et al. 47 found that 28 days after rats were injected intraperitoneally with N-methyl-N-nitrosurea, their photoreceptors had degenerated and melanopsin protein expression in iPRGCs had decreased markedly, although it persisted in the soma for a long time. They suggested that intact photoreceptors may be necessary for the normal distribution of melanopsin in iPRGCs. On the other hand, some studies suggest that melanopsin expression by iPRGCs is independent of classical photoreceptor input. For example, the appearance of iPRGCs and melanopsin distribution within these cells did not differ between rodless, coneless mice and age-matched, wild-type mice. For the ACE, lacking certain enzymes that regulate the visual cycle, the melanopsin photocycle can occur independently of both the rod and cone photocycles. In neonatal albino rats, in which rods and cones are not fully developed, changes in melanopsin protein expression were independent of rod and cone input. Moreover, 1 month after albino rats were exposed to white light, 3000 LX, melanopsin expression began to recover gradually, while photoreceptors continued to die. Some of these discrepancies between studies may be due to differences in the experimental protocols and the models that were used, that is, light-induced retinal damage versus chemically induced damage versus knockout rodent models. However, it remains unclear whether the damage to the photoreceptors in our rats was related to the changes in their iPRGCs. Blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOVs or January 2022 or Vol. No one or Article 26. Several of our observations suggest that A&E to blue light damage the iPRGCs. First, the melanopsin-positive varicosities were less numerous and less prominent in the A&E group than in the other groups. Second, in the inner plexiform layer, all dendrites were vacuolized and had swollen mitochondria with disrupted cristae. Third, in the nerve fiber layer, the same lesions were observed in all the axons. Fourth, in RGCs in the ganglion cell layer, the number of free ribosomes and of cystins of the rough endoplasmic reticulum appeared to be lower in the A&E group than in the other groups. Apoptosis signals were not detected in the ganglion cell layer, but it is possible that, if the exposure had been prolonged, these cells would have undergone apoptosis. Although iPRGCs cannot be distinguished from other RGCs by electron microscopy, all RGCs in these sections displayed these abnormalities. To identify possible differences in the degree to which RGCs and iPRGCs respond to blue light exposure, future studies could use immunoelectron microscopy. These lesions and changes in the iPRGCs may be due to several causes. RGCs are susceptible to blue light exposure because their axons and dendrites contain numerous mitochondria, 2223. These organelles can be harmed by short-wavelength blue light, which causes oxidative stress and reduces RGC cell survival, 50.51. The varicosities in iPRGCs contain large numbers of mitochondria, 23, which suggests that the mitochondrial lesions we observed could have been related to the reduced number and prominence of melanopsin-positive varicosities. The iPRGCs can be more resistant than other RGCs to some injuries like axotomy or optic nerve injury, 52 to 54, but in other models, for example experimental glaucoma or inherited photoreceptor degeneration, the iPRGC death rate is similar to that of rods and cones. 55.6. The iPRGCs seem to be more resistant to direct damage from light exposure than conventional photoreceptors, 4.6.9. However, our results indicate that A&E to blue light was probably sufficient to damage iPRGCs, and that this damage was probably the direct result of blue light exposure, as there was not enough time for remodeling processes to damage these cells. The molecular mechanism of light-induced damage to RGCs and iPRGCs remains unclear. 58. Although melanopsin is downregulated after light exposure, it could have contributed to iPRGC damage. As mentioned above, when melanopsin is activated by blue light, it produces reactive oxygen species, 41 to 43. Light-activated melanopsin may open transient photoreceptor potential calcium ion channels in the cell membrane, leading to an influx of calcium ions and further production of reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria. 58. Investigating the potential role of melanopsin in direct damage to iPRGCs from light exposure would be an interesting topic for future studies. We speculate that the lesions observed in the RGCs, which could include iPRGCs, may have had at least two effects. First, because the mitochondria in the axons and dendrites of these cells may help to meet the high energy demands of signal transmission. 24. The mitochondrial lesions may have disrupted signal transmission between iPRGCs, other retinal neurons, and various brain regions responsible for image and non-image forming responses. Second, the changes in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, coupled with a reduction in the number of free ribosomes, may explain the reduction in melanopsin staining that we saw, which is consistent with quantitative studies on the effects of light exposure on melanopsin expression. Because differ. NT types of iPRGCs are involved in image-forming and non-image-forming functions. 59.60. It would be interesting to investigate whether all types of iPRGCs are equally vulnerable to blue light. In summary, we found that exposure to blue light reduces melanopsin immunoreactivity in the iPRGCs of pigmented rats. We showed that, although continuous exposure to blue light at 1000 LX for 2 days does not cause RGC death, it damages the mitochondria in axons and dendrites of RGCs, likely including iPRGCs. This suggests possible disruption of signal transmission between iPRGCs and other retinal neurons, and between iPRGCs and different regions of the brain responsible for image and non-image forming responses. Future work could use immunoelectron microscopy to study iPRGC morphology after blue light exposure and investigate whether and to what extent melanopsin is involved in direct damage to iPRGCs from light exposure. Acknowledgements. The authors thank Mark Leonard for help with statistical graphics, statistical analyses, editing, and English language usage. We also thank Natalia Ziolkowska, Maria Hanuszewska, and Jacek Stork for their technical assistance. Supported by Grant Number Deck 2017-1, XN4 838 from the Polish National Science Centre. The project was co-supported by the Ministry of Science and Higher Education under the Regional Initiative of Excellence Programme for 2019 to 2022, Project Number 010, RID 2018-19. Amount of funding, PLN 12 million. Disclosure, N. Ziolkowska, none. M. Kmielewska-Kreminska, none. Winiarska, none. W. Sienkiewicz, none. References. 1. Tosini G. Ferguson I. Tobota K. Effects of Blue Light on the Circadian System and Eye Physiology. Review Molviz. 2016 2461-72. 2. International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. ICNIRP. Light-emitting diodes, LEDs. Implications for safety. Health Phys. 2020 118 549-561. Ratnayak K. Peyton J.L. Megami, Godij N.H., Gianfrido E., Karunarathni A. Blue light-triggered photochemistry and cytotoxicity of retinal. Cell signal. 2020-69. Crimsey, 547. 4. Grimsey, Wenzel A., Williams T., Roll P., Hafezi F., Remmer C. Rhodopsin-mediated blue light damage to the rat retina, effect of photoreversal of bleaching. Invest, Ophthalmal Vis Sci, 2001-42, 497-505. 5. Shang Y. Wang G., Sliny D.H., Yang C., Li L. Light-emitting diode-induced retinal damage and its wavelength dependency in vivo. Int J. Ophthalmal, 2017-10, Schumand, 1, 202. 6. Rohelek C., Schumann U., Ada M., Nels L., Funk R.H., Influence of blue light on photoreceptors in a live retinal explant system. Molviz, 2011, 17876 to 884. 7. G. Dane I, Villalpando Rodriguez G., and others retinal phototoxicity and the evaluation of the blue light hazard of a new solid-state lighting technology. SCI Rep. 2010, Sliney, 733. 8. Muller Ha, Sliney DH, retinal sensitivity to damage from short wavelength light. Nature. 1976, 260, 153 to 155. 9. Shang Y, Wang Jis, Sliney D, Yang C, Li L White light-emitting diodes, LEDs at domestic lighting levels, and blue light reduces melanopsin expression, IOVs, or January 2022, or VOL. 6301, or Article 2610, retinal injury in a rat model. Environ Health Perspect, 2014 122, 269 to 276. 10. Jardine I, Boulengues P, Chahari S, and others retinal damage induced by commercial light-emitting diodes, LEDs. Free Radic Biomed, 2015, 84, 373 to 384. 11. Geiger P, Barban M, Grimm C, Samadzija M. Blue, light-induced retinal lesions, intraretinal vascular leakage, and edema formation in the all-cone mouse retina. Cell Death Dis, 2015-6, 1985. 12. Iandiev I, Worm A, Holborn M, and others Muller cell response to blue light injury of the rat retina. Invest, Ophthalmal, Vis Sci. 2008-49, 3,559 to 3,567. 13. Kriegel A, Badugo M, Picard E, and others, light-induced retinal damage using different light sources, protocols and rat strains reveals lead phototoxicity. Neuroscience. 2016, 14-9, 296 to 307. 14. Kuz Y, Ogawa K, Suruma K, Shimazawa M, Hara H damage of photoreceptor-derived cells in culture induced by light emitting diode-derived blue light. CI Rep. 2014, 4, 5223. 15. Chi the 10th, Kumbalasiri T, Carlson SM, and others induction of photosensitivity by heterologous expression of melanopsin. Nature. 2005, 433, 745 to 749. 16. Gularad, Eka JL, Lol Gs, and others melanopsin cells are the principal conduits for rod cone input to non-image forming vision. Nature. 2008 453, 102 to 105. 17. Schmidt TM, Alum N, Chen S, and others, a role for melanopsin in alpha-retinal ganglion cells and contrast detection. Neuron, 2014-82, 781 to 788, 18. Galindo Romero C, Jimenez Lopez M, Garcia Ayuso D, and others number and spatial distribution of intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in the adult albino rat. XP IRAS, 2013-108, 84 to 93. Denias J, Shen F, Goldblum D, and others cytoarchitecture of the retinal ganglion cells in the rat. Invest Ophthalmal Vis C, 2002, 43, 3, 587 to 594.20. Garcia Ayuso D, Galindo Romero C, D.E. Pier Domenico J, and others light-induced retinal degeneration causes a transient downregulation of melanopsin in the rat retina. XP IRES, 2017-161, 10 to 16. Benedetto M&M, Guido May, Contin Ma, non-visual photopigments effects of constant light-emitting diode light exposure on the inner retina of Wistar rats. Front neural, 2017, 840. 22. Bristow EA, Griffiths PG, Andrews RM, Johnson Ma, Turnbull DM. The distribution of mitochondrial activity in relation to optic nerve structure. Arch Ophthalmal, 2002 120 791 to 796. 23. Belenki Ma, Smaraski CA, Provencio I, Solas PJ, Picker GE Melanopsin retinal ganglion cells receive bipolar and amacrine cell synapses. J. Comp Neural, 2003 460 380 to 393 24. Osborne N, Lee GD, Mortiboys HJ, Jackson S. Light affects mitochondria to cause apoptosis to cultured cells, possible relevance to ganglion cell death in certain optic neuropathies. J. Neurochem, 2008, 105, 2013 to 2028, 25, Cheney, Soderberg PG, Lindstrom B cytochrome oxidase activity in rat retina after exposure to 404 nanometers blue light. Kerr IRES, 2002 11 825 to 831, 26. Garcia Ayuso D, Pierdomenico J.D., Vidal Sanz M., Villegasperez MP. Retinal ganglion cell death as a late remodeling effect of photoreceptor degeneration. Int J. Mols, survival of some photoreceptor cells in albino rats following long-term exposure to continuous light. Invest Ophthalmal Vis Sci, 1976 15 Chastifore to 70, 28. Hannibal J., Georg B., Foreign Krug J. differential expression of melanopsin mRNA and protein in brown Norwegian rats. XPI, Res. 2013 16 55 263, 29. Matthews A., Engel L., Holthus H., Woloshek T., Spazert R. Daily profile in melanopsin transcripts depends on seasonal lighting conditions in the rat retina. J. Neuroendocrinol, 2007, 19, 952 to 957, 30. Sakamoto K., Lucy, Tosini G. Classical photoreceptors regulate melanopsin mRNA levels in the rat retina.
J. Niroshi,
2000 and 424, 949, 693 to 9697. 31. Dreisig K., Wojciechowski, Blixt F., Warfinge K. retinal cryosections, hole mounts, and hypertonic isolated vasculature preparations for immunohistochemical visualization of microvascular pericytes. J. Vis Exp., Davidson Rs., Naknami KC, Johnson GD, Davidson Rs., McNamee KC, Russell G., Goodwin D., Holborough EJ. Fading of immunofluorescence during microscopy, a study of the phenomenon and its remedy. J. Immunologic Meth, 1982 55 to 231 to 242, 33. Schindlin J., Arganda Carreras I, Fries E., Koenig V, Longer M., Peach T., and others VG, an open-source platform for biological image analysis. NatMeth, 2012 9 676 to 682, 34. Meijering E., Jacob M., Saria JCF, Steiner P., Hurling H., Answer M design and validation of a tool for neurite tracing and analysis in fluorescence microscopy images. Cytometry A, 2004 58, 167 to 176, 35, R-Core Team. A language and environment for statistical computing. Vienna, Austria, R Foundation for Statistical Computing, 2021, 36. Wilcox R Introduction to Robust Estimation and Hypothesis Testing. Waltham, Ma, Academic Press. Waltham, Wilcox R Introduction to 7th, and others, Cytoarchitecture of the Retinal Ganglion Cells in the Rat. Invest, Ophthalmal, Vis Sci. 2002, 43, 3, 587 to 594, 38. Hannibal J., Georg B., Henderson P., Fahrenkrug J light and darkness regulate melanopsin in the retinal ganglion cells of the albino Wistar rat. J. Moll Neurosi, 2005, 27, 147 to 155, 39. Hannibal J., Georg B., Fahrenkrug J. Melanopsin changes in neonatal albino rat independent of rods and cones. Neuroreport, 2007, 1881 to 85. 40. González Menendez I, Contreras F., Sanuda R., Provencio I, Garcia Fernandez J.M., Postnatal Development and Functional Adaptations of the Melanopsin Photoreceptive System in the Albino Mouse Retina. Invest, Ophthalmol, Visci. 2010 51. 2840 to 4847. 41. Tao J., Joe W., Jew the 10th. Mitochondria as potential targets and initiators of the blue light hazard to the retina. Oxid Medcell Longev. 2019-2019 6,435,364. 42. Koyanagi M., Terakita A., Diversity of animal opsin-based pigments and their optogenetic potential. Biocheme Biophys, Acta. 2014, 1837 710 to 716.
43.
Politini Mo, Moras M., Ramos Geronimo R., Castrucci AML. TRP channels, a missing bond in the entrainment mechanism of peripheral clocks throughout evolution. Temperature, 2015 to 522 to 534. 44. Dacey DM, Liao Hodge W., Peterson BB, and others melanopsin-expressing ganglion cells in primate retina signal color and irradiance, and project to Thel Yen. Nature, 2005, 433, 749 to 754. 45. Sonderrecker KB, Onyak Jr., Islam SW, Ross CL, Brenner JM. Melanopsin ganglion cell outer retinal dendrites, morphologically distinct and asymmetrically distributed in the mouse retina. J. Comp Neural, 2017 525, 3,653 to 3,665. 46. Lucas R.J., Lowell G's, Allen A.E., Brown T.M., How Rod, Cone, and Melanopsin photoreceptors come together to enlighten the mammalian circadian clock. Prog, Brain Res. 2012 199, 1 to 18. 47. Won J., Jung H., Hu Bai, and others, acute photoreceptor degeneration downregulates melanopsin expression in adult rat retina. Neurosi Let, 2006 448 to 52, 48. Simo M., Lupi D., Pearson S.N., Butler J.N., Foster R.G., light-induced CFOs in melanopsin retinal ganglion cells of. Blue light reduces melanopsin expression. IOV's January 2022, or Vol. 63 or Number 1, Article 26 or 11. Young and aged rodless coneless, RDRDCL, mice. J. Neuroshi, 2007 and 7 to 3017-49. 2TC, Owens L.A., Anderson L., and others in a retinal photoreception independent of the visual retinoid cycle. Procnatal Acad Sci. USA, 2006 103 Pen, 426 to 10,431. 50. Núñez Alvarez C., Osborne N. Blue light exacerbates and red light counteracts negative insults to retinal ganglion cells in situ and R28 cells in vitro. Neurochem, int. 2019 125 187 to 196. 51. Osborne N. Núñez Alvarez C. Del Olmo Aguado S. The effect of visual blue light on mitochondrial function associated with retinal ganglion cells XPI Res. 2014. 128, 8 to 14. 52. Nadal Nicholas FM. Madeira MH, Salinas Navarro M., and others transient downregulation of melanopsin expression. After retrograde tracing, or optic nerve injury in adult rats. Invest ophthalmal vis sci. 2015 a 56 4,300 and 9 to 4,323. 50 sick. Sobrado Calves M. Vidal Sans M. Agudo Barriuso M. Long-term effect of optic nerve exotomy on the retinal ganglion cell layer. Invest ophthalmal vis sci. 2015 B56 6,095 to 6,112. 54. Q. Ren C. Solas PJ. Pickard GE. So KF. The injury-resistant ability of melanopsin expressing intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Rev Neurose. 2015 284 845 to 853. 55. Rovia G. Nadal Nicholas FM, Wang J, and others melanopsin-containing or non-melanopsin-containing retinal ganglion cells response to acute ocular hypertension with or without brain-derived neurotrophic factor neuroprotection. Invest ophthalmal vis sci. 2016-57, 6,652 to 6,661. 56. Garcia Ayuso D, Pierdomenico J.D., Esquiva G, and others inherited photoreceptor degeneration causes the death of melanopsin-positive retinal ganglion cells and increases their co-expression of BRN3A. Invest ophthalmal vis sci. 2015-56, 4,500 and 92 to 4,604. 57. Mark Ree, Jones BW, Watt CB, Vaughan DK, Organisiak DT. Extreme retinal remodeling triggered by light damage, implications for age-related macular degeneration. Molvis. 2008, 14, 782 to 806. 58. Sang A, Chang E, Lu H, and others, light-induced retinal ganglion cell damage in vivo involves dextrose 1, Molvis, 2011-17 134 to 143. 59. Reifler An, Chervenak Api, Dolikian Me, and others. The rat retina has 5 types of ganglion cell photoreceptors. XP IRES, 2015 130-17 to 28.
60.
Hata, intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Many subtypes. Diverse functions. Trends Neuroshi. 2011-34 572 to 580.